There's a drive way back. It might be. It could be. It is. Holy cow. Welcome to another broadcast of Bricks Behind the Ivy.
Hey, Cub fans, welcome to another episode of Bricks Behind the Ivy. Thank you so much to our awesome sponsors, Wrigleyville Sports, the best sports store in Wrigleyville, and Yaggy Road Roasting Company, based in Valparaiso, Indiana, serving cups of coffee just as special as the moments you drink them in.
Hello, welcome to Bricks Behind the Ivy.
Hey, Cub fans, welcome to another episode of Bricks Behind the Ivy, the podcast built brick by brick for Cub fans by Cub fans. I am Jeff CandidCubs Ragauskis, F-Warrior, known to be shawsome from time to time, a lifelong Northsider with blue blood in my veins, an old-style no forgets in hand, and a front row seat to every W flag moment and soul-crushing sweep, which I think is a perfect transition to the soul-crushing sweep we did this weekend of our rivals, which we're going to get into a little bit today, the Chicago White Sox. Hope everyone had a great weekend. I know I had a good weekend of catching some baseball in between kidtivities. And, you know, if you were following me on Twitter, which make sure you are at CandidCubs, I was watching the baseball game from a kid's birthday party this weekend. And after we sang happy birthday, the Cubs were no longer losing. It was 4-1 Cubs on Saturday. So happy birthday might be my rally song for a little bit because I'm not superstitious. I'm just a little stitious. And shout out to our friends at Yaggy Road Roasting Company, a boutique coffee roaster based in Valparaiso, Indiana. That's my alma mater, Go Beacons. Yaggy is owned by 3 fellow Valpo alum, and they roast coffee as special as the moments you drink them in. So before we get rolling, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. Make sure that if you're listening on the audio, you're hitting that subscribe button and leaving a review on your favorite podcast app. It helps more brickheads find the show. And be sure that you are subscribing to this YouTube channel, so hit that subscribe button down there. And this is the Bleacher Punch Network. You're going to get so many other shows, as this is the home of Cubs PS Plus with Mike Waller, of course Sun Ranto with the great Danny Rocket, Cup of Cubby Blue with Sarah Sanchez, the Bleacher Bunch Show featuring all of us from time to time, and Baseball Rabbit Hole with Michael Cotton. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, you get a daily Cubs recap show called Cubs Pod, which features a bunch of us, and even Michael Cotton's son Eli joins in from time to time, which is pretty cool. Family affair, as Cub fans tend to be largely familial tied. Want even more Cubs content? Join our Patreon for exclusive extras, including some of Danny's great songs, shirts, all these things. There's a link in the description in the bio. So, great week for our Chicago Cubs. 5-1, taking care of business. Every day, taking care of business. Yeah, but I'll stop singing. But yeah, this is one of those weeks where the Cubs play a little bit lower quality of opponent in the Marlins and the White Sox, and you have expectations going into that week of the Cubs winning some games. And I'm always hesitant to make these declarations when baseball teams play teams like this, like, you must win these games, or if they don't win these games, they're a terrible team, because baseball has this dance a little bit with Lady Luck of the timing of when you play a team, as they always talk about. It's not if a team's good or bad, it's when you actually play them. I mean, ask the Angels. The Angels got swept in Dodger Stadium this weekend by the Angels, and I don't see many people thinking that the Angels are a great baseball team, but you know, the Dodgers were the off-season champions, and you know, there's the parade for off-season champions every year, so we must honor them as off-season champions like we would. But it just goes to show you that a team that's not very good can beat a very good baseball team just because they're on a heater, they have a moment, they have a little extra motivation. So I always respect these lower opponents a little bit more than I think the average fan. Maybe that's a little bit of hesitancy to make this declaration of, hey, this team's really bad, and knowing that the baseball gods usually can humble you very quickly. So maybe that's a me thing. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think when the Cubs or your favorite baseball team, it better be the Cubs if you're listening to this podcast, lose to teams like the White Sox or the Marlins right now, who are just not really trying to win. You can tell by their off seasons. You can tell by a whole bunch of things. But anywho, it was a 5-1 week against the Marlins and the White Sox. It was an exciting week for Cub fans too, as the youth movement continues. We saw Cade Horton get his first official start, as in starting the game instead of what he did with the Mets last week. His second career win already. The results weren't incredible, but he's got 2 wins under his belt, which we can talk about whether or not the win is a meaningless stat, depending on how you're evaluating it. But being able to pitch 4 or 5 innings and qualifying for a win is still something that adds to this team. He's bringing value to the 2025 Chicago Cubs, just like we thought he would, just not in the situation in which we'd love it, in which it's without Shota Imanaga and it's without Justin Steele. And then Moises Ballesteros, there's been calls from the fandom for him to be called up since last year when the offense kind of sputtered towards the end of last season. And yeah, not this incredible debut weekend for him, but he did get his first major league hit. Congratulations to Moises, his first major league RBI. His family was there all weekend. Super cool. I always love those. I'm a sucker for those family shots where they show the family going bananas, because as all of you who have played the game or just appreciate the game, like getting to the show, getting to that top level in baseball, highest competition in the world, lots of sacrifices, potentially lots of money, especially for kids that are signed out of that international free agent class. Like, they're taking gambles, like coming to a different country, being uncomfortable in a situation that I can't imagine. And then they rise through the ranks of the minor leagues. He's still an extremely young player, the 3rd youngest in Major League Baseball currently, and gets a hit at the professional level. Regardless of what happens next, that's really cool. He's got something to build off of, something as he continues to grow, as he continues to learn to take care of his body, and the hit tool is going to be there. He had some real hard contact on Sunday as the Cubs tried to Sunday Cubs and lose, but ended up pulling that game out to complete the sweep. So before we move on, today's topic is going to be, should we really care about Cubs socks anymore? And this is a question I've kind of been asking myself for the better part of probably 2-3 years, especially the last 2, from the White Sox perspective, because they had the worst record in the history of the sport, and the Colorado Rockies are like, hold my beer. They're trying to figure out how to be way worse than last year's White Sox team. Firing Bud Black isn't going to fix that, just like firing Brendan Hyde out in Baltimore isn't going to fix this situation. They should hire, instead of managers, just mirrors for the clubhouse, so when the front office walks in, they can see exactly whose fault it is for the teams performing poorly. Because it turns out that if you don't address pitching when you don't have pitching, it turns out your team has the worst pitching ERA in baseball. Without looking at you, Orioles, and then you're like, what? Shocked Pikachu face. Why is this happening? Yeah, a little self-evaluation needs to be going on out in Baltimore, which stinks because they have an extremely good young core that's fun to watch. But yeah, if they want to make dumb decisions, as my buddy Hot Stove Cubbies tweet out, that maybe they can just send the Cubs Kobe Mayo for, I don't know, nothing. So we can have a player with some upside. But yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, what I do want to do is name our Cubs player and pitcher of the week. This segment is brought to you, as always, by Wrigleyville Sports. They're located across the street from Wrigley Field since 1990, and they're stocked with everything a die-hard, blue-bleeding Cub fan could ever want, including custom jerseys you can get right before first pitch. Grab your peanuts and Cracker Jacks, fans, because it is time for the Wrigleyville Sports / Bricks Behind the Ivy player and pitcher of the week. So I feel like the hitter of the week is just so obvious, and it is the guy that makes this team, not just on a local level as a Cub fan level watchable, but on a national level. Pete Crow Armstrong, PCA, PC Annihilated, PC Awesome. So many A words that we can use at the end of his name to describe him. And really, he's electricity in a bottle. There's just so many things about this guy's game that's fun to watch. Yeah, he's not going to walk a lot at this stage of what he is. He's going to strike out, a frustrating amount of times, but he is just so exciting and is playing at such another level. He had 2 triples at Wrigley this week, 2 home runs. He had a weighted runs created plus of 269 this week with .8 WAR just in 6 games. This is bananas. This guy is he's elevating himself from being, one of those young guys that if he emerged for the Cubs are a way better team, but he's emerging into something that is part of the MVP conversation, believe it or not. And I think if you are on Cubs social media, if you're on baseball social media, you probably saw some stuff on Instagram, you saw some stuff on Twitter this weekend about Pete Crow Armstrong and his F4, which is wins above replacement calculated by Fangraphs. That's what F4 is for those who don't necessarily want to dive into the analytics, which I can get from time to time, but I think that is worthy of a Bricks Behind the IV nerd alert, as I do love getting into the weeds.
Nerd alert! Nerd alert!
So, Pete Crow Armstrong currently is third in baseball in 2025 with a 3 F4, only behind Aaron Judge. So if you were to only use that as your evaluation point, Pete Crow Armstrong is the leading candidate at this very moment, potentially, for the National League MVP. And why not? The guy produces not just offensively and has been an exciting part of the Cubs offense and this development into them being a multifaceted, full-functioning offense, but he is an insanely good defender. Players have to question whether or not they should run on him regardless of where he's been on the field. We've already seen some just incredible throws from Pete, and that's just what he's providing in the defensive end. We always knew the glove was going to be a really nice floor for PCA. And if you want to look at why the 2025 Chicago Cubs are so much better or expected or feel a lot better than the 2024 Chicago Cubs, look no further than the season-long F4. And, we'll have a visual here if you're watching on the show. But last year, the Cubs had one top 30 player in F4, and it was Dansby Swanson because of what he brings, defensively every day. It's a big component of it. He plays shortstop, and he has solid offensive numbers, nothing banging the door down. This year, the Cubs currently have 3 players in the top 27 or top 30, as Dansby Swanson's currently 27, and Kyle Tucker is in the middle of that group with PCA number 2 behind Aaron Judge. So when we were talking this offseason about the Cubs taking another step and needing to add a star, they've done that. They've done that in bringing Kyle Tucker, and then they've had the emergence of PCA into being another star. So yeah, lock down Kyle Tucker. I don't think I need to tell anyone listening to this as what Cub fans want. We need to lock down Kyle Tucker and then have PCA and Tucker in that outfield for years to come and really solidify this core as they enter their next competitive window. So on the pitching side, who were the best pitchers this week for the Cubs? Well, pitching wasn't necessarily the focus of the wins this week. The Cubs really had a nice offensive week, and they looked really good, pitching. But I'm going to give it to, just because he had 2 starts this week and got 2 quality starts in there, Mr. Colin Ray as our Cubs pitcher of the week. He had 12 innings pitched in 2 starts. And a 2.25 ERA. Wasn't exactly, lighting it up. He didn't strike out a bunch, just 7 in 2 starts. But looked really good out there on a 2-start week for him. 1 against the Marlins and 1 against the White Sox. They were talking on the broadcast about how his change back to his natural arm slot here in 2025 has really increased the velocity, has increased the play of the fastball, and has made him look so good. He has just been a vital piece to this Cubs rotation as they, survive's not the correct word, but, hold things down while they wait for Shodi Minaga to come back and figure out, how to adequately replace a Justin Steele, which I'm not sure you can do in season, but we'll see what this team has or what this front office has to cook up. So those are your Wrigleyville Sports players and pitchers of the week. It's been a while since we've seen him, but Harry Carey's got some thoughts this week, some deep thoughts from Harry Carey. Take it away, Harry.
And now, some deep thoughts with Harry Carey.
How Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to another Deep Thoughts with the man, Harry Carey. Bye, oh bye. Cub fans, it's great to see you here on old Bricks Behind the Ivy. Jeff and Pat, you've been doing a great job holding down the fort. Sorry I haven't been here. I've been getting a little inebriated and watching some great Cub baseball out at 1060 West Addison. Boy, the old landmark hasn't looked sweeter. The boys are rolling. But guess what time it is? Bye, oh bye, it's time for the Crosstown Classic. Oh, and I'll drink to that one. Ooh, that tastes so good. But any event, it's the Crosstown Classic time where our White Sox come up north to 1060 to take on our boys. Boy, oh boy, I can't wait. You know, it's been a lot of great history in this classic rivalry between the two ball clubs. We like to call it the L Series. Choo-choo, ka-choo-choo. Oh boy, I remember the first game ever back in June of 97. Beautiful day out of the ballpark. The sights in the bleachers. Boy, oh boy. Drink to that one. Ooh, anyway, the Cubbies won 8-3, and it's been history ever since. I remember shortly thereafter, the great basketball man himself, Michael Jeffrey Jordan, called up by AA Birmingham, was actually booed. By Mikey, I bet you weren't used to getting booed in Chicago, so stick to basketball. Yeah, you had a decent game, but you know what? Cubs win! Cubs win! And it's been history ever since. But I'll never forget my very classic favorite moment of there all was when Michael Barrett did a little 1-2 on A.J. Pierzynski after a rough slide back in May 20th of 06. Oh, the bench is cleared. Ozzy's going cuckoo for Cocoa Puff. Oh, it was a great day. Love it. I love to remind all the Sox fans that I know about that one. But boy, there's been even other greater games. How about Morrell 2 years ago hitting a walk-off donger to beat the White Sox? But you know what? It's time to continue history. Our boys are riding a 5-game winning streak dating back to the last game in 23. We got Kate Harden, the young kid, on the bump for the Friday game. It's going to be a rockin' weekend at the Federal Landmark. Oh, this is for you, Cub Nation. Oh, let's go get them, boys. I want to hear a lot of Cubs win. Cubs win. But from all of us down here at the Wrigley Fire Bar and Grill, this is Harry taking it back to you, Jeff. And so long, everybody.
As always, I enjoy when Harry comes on to the broadcast, and what a special, cool little thing we have. Make sure you're leaving notes in the comments to say hi to Harry, and maybe at some point we can feature a brickhead in Deep Thoughts with Harry Carey. That'd be super fun, so check that out. I wanted to talk about, since it was Cub Sox weekend this weekend, Cub Sox, and whether or not it really should matter. And it's a really weird way of phrasing it, but it's really something I've been thinking about a lot lately. So when I grew up, if it hasn't been, discussed enough on this podcast, but I'm from the south suburbs of Chicago. I grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago, and I am a cradle Cubs fan. I am a Cubs fan because my grandmother was a big Cubs fan she was telling me, shout out to my grandma, when I saw her for Mother's Day, about how she became a Cubs fan. It was really just, there was, ladies' nights in which she could get into the games for free back when she was younger, and there was some other people in the neighborhood that were going to Cub games, and that's how she got introduced to the Cubs. And it's that community going to Cubs games that had her fall in love with the game of baseball, had her fall in love with the Cubs, and that's how I became a Cub fan. Just family, long tradition, WGN access, things that are just holistically very different for the young fan today. And I was thinking about this too as well. It was Cubs Sox this weekend, and I always kind of try to find more Cubs stuff to put on during Cubs Sox weekend to really show around the south suburbs my colors. Because, growing up, it felt to me way more heated than it is now. It was, people made fun of you for being a Cubs fan, and people did not respond very well to you wearing Cubs stuff. Like, I've had situations not long enough ago, but getting long enough ago, where I would be out walking with my wife before we have kids, going to get a drink from the local gas station that was by our condo when we first got married, and I'd be wearing Cubs stuff, and people would yell "Cubs suck" out the window and throw things at us. I don't think we're there anymore. I don't think anyone cares. And I saw a social media video this weekend about Sox social media influencer interviewing Sox fans that were on the north side, asking things they would give up in order to just get one win versus the Cubs. And some guy said his pinky finger, the other one said their husband. And like, I know this is tongue in cheek, but I just don't feel that rivalry anymore. And I also have started to wonder, like, even if it's worth it, if it's worth having this rivalry, because, you know, at the end of the day, like, are these teams' histories, especially, you know, as they continue to interact out of requirement of being part of rivalry weekend in the MLB this weekend, you know, not Cubs Cardinals, not Yankees Red Sox, not some of the more natural rivalries that exist in the sport, but like this forced like regional rivalry that just doesn't fit for a lot of different teams in any capacity, you know, at all. Like Tigers Blue Jays, I don't know. As somebody, if you're a Tigers Blue Jays fan listening to this, like, let me know in the comments if there's bad blood between the Tigers and the Blue Jays. But I mean, I just struggle as growing up as someone on the South Side, and it feels different. And I'll blame front office executives. I'll blame Jerry Reinsdorf for really just taking all the wind out of the sails out of the White Sox. You know, I think when I this week was Jersey week at my kids' school, and my kids wore Cubs jerseys because I forced them to. Let's be honest, I put them in. My daughter loves baseball. My son is mixed about it, but they wear the Cubs thing. They wear their Bricks Behind the Ivy T-shirts because they love their dad. And when I came and picked them up from school, and I know it was only a smaller population in school, but not only were there not many kids in jerseys at all, there were no White Sox jerseys. There were like one or two Cub jerseys beyond my kids. And if I did see a jersey, it was for either Shohei Ohtani, if it was a baseball jersey, or LeBron or Luka Doncic. And this is the south suburbs of Chicago. Like, the Chicago teams have become so irrelevant in conversation, or at least exposure to youth, or exposure to the adults in those houses, that there's just, on Jersey Day, you don't see fandom. You don't see, and that makes me sad, because I just don't feel like that, especially baseball, has a hard time reaching that demographic. But I digress. This team's history, the Cubs and the White Sox, they've been around a long time. The Chicago White Sox were established in 1901. And even before that, the Cubs have been around since 1876. And the Cubs have only been in the playoffs 23 times in that 149 years, where the White Sox have only been 11 times in 124 years. That's bananas, considering that the Yankees have more World Series championships than either of these teams have single playoff appearances. And a lot of this also has been more recent, believe it or not. Like, there's been, so since 1983, 7 of those 11 playoff appearances for the White Sox have happened. And in that span, the Cubs have 11, and 8 of those have come since 2001. So in the last 24 years for the Cubs, like, we've been in the playoffs 8 times. And in that period, we won a World Series. So when there's this frustration amongst Cubs fans, it is really weird to think that the last 25 years have been the best version of the Cubs that we have potentially ever seen in the history of this team. Both these teams only hold 3 World Series championships total, and also both of them went on historically long droughts, as much as ESPN likes to negate it for the White Sox, in between their second and their third World Series championship. The White Sox at 85 years and the Cubs at 108. And, you know, I remember in 2015 giving some of my White Sox fan friends just some gruff about it being 10 years since they had won the World Series, and, you know, making fun of that. And, you know, they didn't really have a ton of playoff appearances in between those periods, so there wasn't the sustained success there. And the Cubs, they had a ton of playoff appearances after 2016, but not, you know, winning another World Series, because winning multiple World Series, especially appears in this era, is extremely difficult. Like, we were so spoiled when the late 90s with the Yankees, where it looked like it was so easy to rattle off several of these World Series championships in a row. And even if you look at other sports, you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, who've been able to rattle out a few of these Super Bowl championships. It's not easy. The games are so hard. These guys are fine-tuned machines now. This is the only thing they do. Spring training isn't where players go to sweat out the beer that they drank all off-season like spring training was established to do. These guys come in and they've been doing an off-season training program, making their bodies ready, and have learned a new skill or eliminated something that was making them inefficient at the plate or on the mound. Like, this is just a completely different ball game, not pun intended. But with this long, miserable history in Chicago, should we really sit here and just hate the other team? Because if both teams suck, if both teams are playing terribly, then the one thing that's going to happen is there's just going to be no conversation about baseball at all in a city that claims to be the third largest media market in the country. So for me, I'm personally done with Cubs White Sox because I don't care. It would be really nice if when these teams played each other, both of them were trying and both of them were good. What do you think? Do you think Cubs Sox still matters? Let me know in the comments, as I think it's a really interesting discussion on whether or not the passion exists there, especially when baseball has the highest average aged fan out of any of the professional sports at over 57 years old. So is that long history of Cubs Sox really fueling that fire? Or is it really all Sox fans currently have left is playing the Cubs because their team is just in this weird feudal moment of just absolutely no resemblance of trying to assemble a team that is remotely competitive for the last few seasons? So let me know in the comments. Before I let you go, we're going to introduce a new segment because I really wanted to talk about this, and I love keyboard warriors who hide behind things on the internet. So we're going to do the first ever Bricks Behind the Ivy mean tweet reaction. Yes, mean tweet reaction. And you're asking, CandidCubs, what is a mean tweet reaction? Well, it's from the segment that used to be on Jimmy Kimmel where he had celebrities read their mean tweets. And I'm going to look at a mean tweet that I got this week and talk about it because I think that's fun. So this week, I had put out a tweet talking, or on Blue Sky, I also did on Blue Sky, mentioning that there was this movement that I'd come across my timelines about with Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson being removed from the lifetime ban list, being dead, that Trevor Bauer should be off the black belt list as a person who's alive. First of all, Trevor Bauer he's not banned. He just sucks as a person, so he's not back in the game. And Trevor Bauer is one of the people fanning the flames as usual, because that's just the type of person he is. And really, it's just come down to this for me with Trevor Bauer. Trevor Bauer has made his own bed. It's simple as that. He has had all these accusations from several women, some in LA, some in Cleveland from when he was back in Cleveland. And if my understanding of the modern world, or my try to be an empath towards women in this world, it is extremely difficult as a woman to come out and say that something that has made you uncomfortable has happened. And the Me Too movement has made it more possible for people to feel comfortable to say that something has happened, which is great because these things have happened. These sorry, I can't say that, exchanges that have existed in different parts of society for a long time, all these uncomfortable interactions that have happened, unfortunately, predominantly from men, because of toxic masculinity, have existed. So we don't have all the facts. We don't. We have the public discourse and the public information about what happened between Trevor Bauer and specifically an individual out in LA. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about being the court of a public opinion and adjudicate Trevor Bauer. However, I am going to say that since that, his behavior, and prior to that, his behavior is bad. He has a YouTube channel where he spent the better part of 2 years talking about sticky stuff and pointing out the hypocrisy of Major League Baseball and allowing people to use this and adding it to his pitches and make sure he got different spin. And then after getting caught, he talked about the different stuff, and he kind of became the scapegoat, let's be honest, because he was the one sitting on top of a tower and telling everyone, look at this stuff, I'm using it and I'm better. And then since all the issues that have happened with him, he has just not shut his mouth. And he has opened his mouth on these situations repeatedly and has done stuff like every time he throws a pitch, he screams the F word. He has videotaped himself with just cringy social media personalities to continue to just get him as part of the discussion. Has even claimed that he is one of the best baseball players in the world, while this past weekend or a weekend ago, he gave up 7 earned runs in a Japanese baseball league game. So he's 35. At this point, his demeanor and his actions are enough of a gamble. And then on top of that, we don't know if he has the stuff to compete in the major leagues. And yes, I understand he has talked about cost and all those things, but at the end of the day, I understand the hesitancy with him as a person and how he's chosen to interact with individuals, why people don't give him that job. It's like when you say terrible things all the time and put them out into the ether, the internet is toothpaste, folks. Like once it's out, you can't shove the toothpaste back in the tube. So if you're a ding-dong on the internet, you're officially a ding-dong. That is just the world right now. And I had put out this tweet saying that Trevor Bauer had made his bed himself, and someone, who I will black out his username, you can find it on your own, said that there is a reason that I don't listen to your podcast. Personally, if you're not listening to my podcast because I think Trevor Bauer is a terrible person, I'm actually really glad you're not listening to my podcast, because you're not going to love a lot of the other opinions I have about, rights in this country, rights for individuals, and, just being able to say, I think Trevor Bauer is a bad person. I don't want him on my baseball team. And yes, I understand. I wasn't super thrilled with Aroldis Chapman being on this team. He brought the Cubs a World Series championship, but his background was terrifying. And there's a lot of adjudication of individuals that exists in this society. And there's a lot of people who are potentially bad people. And it depresses me how much more we learn about that now because of modern social media than we did when we were potentially younger, just because of access. Like, I can't imagine Mark Grace in the Twitter era. Could you? The anecdotal things, or the things he's even said on air, have been mildly troubling. But he has the most hits in the 90s, and he was this player that a lot of Cub fans loved. But yeah, maybe he just wasn't the best human being outside of the game. But that's not for me to adjudicate. But in the Twitter era, he wouldn't have been able to kind of hide behind some of that as well. So I responded back and I said, personally, I think you're missing out, while also feeling there's no need for you to be cruel. Have a great day and go Cubs. And with that said, this has been another episode of Bricks Behind the Ivy. You can find us wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure you're going to YouTube and you are hitting that subscribe button and putting comments. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers. We're about 150 people away from that. So make sure you're going there, commenting your thoughts on things we're talking about, trying to engage as we'll engage with you as a community. You're leaving a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, because that's going to help this show grow. So until next week, we got the Cubs playing the Marlins to start off this week with some awesome news potentially. We'll see you next week, and go Cubs.